Tractate Bava Batra, page 93, the subject of monetary disputation when it's come to liability, the idea that one party is going after the other party and we have to make ourselves in a way in between to make decision if we go by the rov, meaning most of the cases, or we go by the mammon, which is the monetary disputation, is the core part of our discussion today. As we explained yesterday, the idea of rov and mammon, it's a heavy disputations, and we use as a springboard the last discussion over selling. In those days it was a sale of slaves, but obviously we can have a derivative in the manner of law by our days. So let's use names. Fellow Reuven sold to Shimon a slave. Shimon said this slave was basically a thief, and he wanted to return it and get his money back. Reuven said, hey, everybody knows that slaves are thieves in those days. If you ask for a specific individual who is the exceptions, exception, then you have to ask for that. Since you didn't ask for that, we have the understanding that that's the average person. So it's not just the slave, it's the concept. Here we are, page 93, 2 lines from the top of the page. And this is a source of something we learn in Tractate Bava Batra, page 46. Tashma, come and hear. Shor shenagach et hapara. Here we're dealing with ox that gore a cow. Those days it was common. Now, the cow was pregnant. She had the embryo. The question is, v'nimtza ubara betzida. You find the embryo aside, and we do not have a clear evidence who did what. Is the ox came from her back? Is the ox came directly? How it happens that she basically lost the embryo, lost the baby. Ve'eino yadua, we are not sure, im ad shelo negacha yalada, if that happened, that she had the miscarriage, the cow, of the embryo, prior to the goring, meaning that miscarriage happened before the ox did the damage, and therefore the owner of the ox will be free from liability. Or im mishenegacha yalda, or if it happens that after, as a result, as direct consequence of the ox gored the cow, she have this miscarriage of the baby, and therefore the owner of the ox is responsible. Now, the Rashbam elaborates, said, look, we do have witnesses, but the witnesses, when it's a cross-examination, when it's a serious testimony, we do not have a clear evidence from their testimony what happened first, what happened second. So in a broader understanding, the Shev Shema that I explained to us is the idea that we know that it was some type of damage, some type of liability. We understand that it's a goring ox, which is obviously the responsibility of its owner. However, we do not know if the result, which is the delivery of the miscarriage of that embryo, was a absolute direct consequences or not. So since it's such a big quandary, it's predicament, we have a dilemma with that. We said that the owner of the ox, mishalem chatzi nezek lapara, he needs to pay the owner of the cow half of the damage. That's basically the din shor tam. If you have a regular ox, and we explain, if you remember when we studied Bava Kama, ox, we go by the 1, 2, 3, which means tam, it's ox that we assume that is okay, is not a goring ox. If things happen once or twice, those who owns dogs, you know what I mean. However, if it's already 3 times onward, we put a new stigma, a new title, a new basically framework of liability, and we said from now on is a mu'ad, is an ox that the owner have full liability. So as we said, if it was just first time or second time, short time, the ox that did it just once, so you impose upon the owner to pay a half of the damage that the goring ox happened just as it happens one time. Pay the compensation to the owner of the cow. Ve'hi, which is because it was not just a damage for the cow, but also the embryo, the baby, the potential calf that wasn't born as the most probably a direct result of the goring. But since we have all the circumstantial evidence that it's not 100% clear to us, we can impose, but the imposition of payment will be a liability of 25%, which is a 1/4 for losing of that baby, which is we have the rule which we studied in the past a lot, mamon hamutal besafek holkim. When you have a monetary disputation, it's not clear, and you have in a sense the fund, but this fund carries a big predicament, and it's not clear in our safek, in our quandary, what exactly happened. So we impose only a half of that. If you want to see more, you can read, the text itself is in the book of Shmot, chapter 21, verse 35. You see more on that both in Bava Kama 46, Bava Metziah, page 100, and you see in the more current response, the whole mahalach, the whole idea of Rabbi Akiva Iger, try to derive the idea of Sfek Sfeika, is based on this circumstantial evidence that we have quandary within the quandary, and therefore we have to impose such a partially payment of liability. Now the Gemara extrapolate in a sense of what exactly happened by the view of Rav. If you remember yesterday we said that following the Rav's view, when it's come to monetary disputation, we go by the majority, which is Rov, most of the cases that things like that happen. So why you call it something mutal besafek, something that you're not 100% sure, since you see the embryo dead and you just ask about the process, what exactly take place and what second, Leima, you should go in different direction. What you should say, Halech achar rov parot, go by most of the cases with liability when it's come to cows. Verov parot mitabrot veyoldot, most of the cows go to any, in Israel there is a kibbutz, moshav, here is a different farmland. You ask, you see that most of average cow deliver a baby cow, a calf, healthy and fine. That's most of the cases. Veha, and this is the exception of the cow, that all of a sudden, unfortunately, we found an embryo at the side of the cow, and we knew that it's somehow connected to the goring ox. Vadai machamat negicha epila. We have a very strong notion and holding an assumption that in this case it is a case of liability, because it has to be the circumstance, it has to be a framework that it's a direct result of the goring. You cannot tell me, oh, this is the exceptions, yotze min haklal, that this is something that it's unusual, that the baby was miscarriage and it's nothing to do with the goring. So because you have all this framework, we hold the notion that the owner of the ox should be liable to pay not a quarter, not 25%, but 50% for that embryo. Why? Because we hold that there is a very serious possibility that it happens directly. So basically, what do you see here? You see here from this school of thought, this logical reasoning, that when it's come to mandatory disputation, you don't go by the most of the cases. As we said, most of the cases is a fine, healthy baby calf. So therefore, that's basically the opposite of the view of Rav. We basically hold the explanation by the Rashbam. You see more on that in Yevamot 119, also the view of Rashbam there as well. But here the Gemara rejected this notion, and the Gemara said, no, we can reconcile the Mishnah with following Rav that said that we do go when it's come to mandatory disputation by the majority. Hatam over there, the reason that we do not impose upon the owner of the ox to pay half of the damage for the embryo is mishum de misapkalan. We are not 100% sure what exactly caused that damage. The ikale meimar mikama ata. There is one notion that one said, look, he came straight to her, which means you put the scenario and you see the cow in one side, the frightening ox come directly the front of her, umibiatuta, she gets so frightened from these huge ox that run toward her, hepila. So here we talk about a new scenario, that guess what the notion of the law. The liability, it's because not the goring per se, but indirect damage that come from a very, in a way, wicked ox. The ox came directly toward the cow. The cow saw it and gets tremendous trepidation, and as a result of that, the cow, the female cow, obviously it's female, right, deliver the embryo, the calf, and miscarriage it. Another notion. So if that happened, hypothetically speaking, these garme, and you can say that the owner of the ox is free. It's the Choshen Mishpat in Shin Pei Vav, the Shach, I've struggled with that concept of grammar, but anyway, we go the other side. There is another possibility that the ox came from the back of the cow, and that happened uminkach negacha, and the way it happens, he ran to her from her back, the pregnant cow, and he gored toward her, and as a result, vehipila, and she miscarried the calf because of the goring, not because of the trepidation, which again, this is a total different scenario, and obviously we can impose payment upon the owner of the ox. Have, and therefore it's mamon hamutal besafek. Here you have a money that it's not, they use the term here in many mefarshim, mamona mutar besafek, money of doubtful ownership. So money of doubtful ownership, the idea is that since one of these contingencies is as likely as the other, the majority rule applies to other monetary cases, cannot be applied here. That's the idea, mamona mutal besafek, v'chol mamona mutal besafek cholkim. So anything that it's in this type of disputation, you divide it. So usually you go batar derov. Tosfot said that is safek shakul. It's like almost equal. The Rashbam Gershom and the Rashbam said that it appears that more relate to fear and trepidation than it relates to the goring itself. I would like to share with you a notion that I heard and read from my brother-in-law, Rav David Avram Mandelbaum, in his book Daf al Daf. He brings here the Pnei Yoshua, the Gemara in Ketubot 9b. We know the Sfek of Rabbi Akiva Iger. So he brings over there the Pnei Yoshua and Tosfot, that it's issue to take out mammon when it's come to sfeka. It's a quandary within the quandary. So, and the question is if it's a one sfeika d'shem shmat taselo, two sfeikot, but the Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Ktav Kabbala brought it at the end of Parashat Bechukotai. He says, this is a very interesting notion of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, that Aflaa too, they say that when it's come to only Mammon, you go by the majority, but when it's come to Mammon and Isur, together, we go by Taruba. Anyway, he wrote extensively about this Sfeika of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Anyway, Leima Ketanai. We have to run, you have a lot of work. So we go to the disputation among, so Rav and Shmuel hold the disputation among the Tanaim. Shor shaya ro'eh. You have here an ox that it was grazing, and unfortunately, v'nimtza shor harug betzido, and it was a dying body of an ox was found on its side. אף על פי שזה מנוגח וזה מועד ליגח, זה מנושך וזה מועד לישוך, אין אומרים בידוע שזה נגחו וזה נשכו. We said that although the one is gore and the one and the other it is want to gore, one beaten and the other want to bite, it is obvious that the one gored or beat the other. So therefore, the owner of that shor muad is exempt from payment. Anyway, Rabbi Acha Omer Gamal ha'ocher ben agmalim. Rabbi said if you have a camel who covers among the other camels. So here, the idea of it's euphemism, which means beyond. So it's likely to attack other males with fatal results. ונמצא גמל הרוג בצידו, you find another camel, בידוע שזה הרגו. So we assume that this type of behavior happened to others. That's again, that's the way, the framework of liability in the sense of the assumptions. But סברו הדרובה והחזקה כעדד עינינו. The svara, the notion here, is that when you have the majority and the confirmed legal status have the same force, Leima Rav de Amar Kabi Acha, you say that Rav hold the same as view as Rabbi Acha, and Ushmuel de Amar Ketana Kama. So the Rav hold that when it's come to mandatory you go by the majority. Shmuel said that you don't go by the majority when it's come to money, so you hold the same as Tanakama, the first, that you do not impose payment of liability for that goring ox. Why? Because Chazaka is not the one who machriya. Amar lach, Rab, Anadam Rafilu Tanakama, Atkan no kamar Tanakama atam, ela de lo azlina batar Chazaka, aval batar uba azlini. So because here we're not guided by the principle of legal status, but guided by the majority. אבל בתר רובה הזלינן, ושמואל אמר לך, אנא דאמר אפילו רבי אחת, כאן לא כמה רבי אחתם, אלא דאזלינן בתר חזקה, דהגופי מוחזק, אבל בתר רובה לא הזלינן. As we said that you have here, דף על דף, my brother לא mentioned, but you see here, של שמעת את התרומת הדשן קצות החושן. The Mefarshim elaborates a lot the whole idea of when you go by the majority, when you have this principle of chazaka. Anyway, we just gave the vignette. Tashma. We bring a siyua lishmur, bring a mishnah, that it's a support the view of Shmuel. Tashma hamocher perot lechavero. A fellow sold a fruit. Reuven sold fruit to Shimon. Uzra'an velo tzamchu. You remember what we studied in Mishnah? And the buyer, Shimon, saw them, and they did not grow. Va'afilu zera pishtan. Even if they are linseed. Eino chayav b'chayutan. He is not responsible. מה אפילו? What does that mean? Even. לאו אפילו זרע פשתן דרובה לזריעה זבני. When you talk about linseed, most of those are for planting. ואפילו אחרי לא אז בתרובה. And even if in such a case is not guided by the majority principles. Why? Because as we see that when it comes to monetary disputation, that's basically opposite thereof. רוב פשתן לצורך זריעה, most of the linseed is for the planting. So how then can Rav say that the majority principle is to be followed? So Gemarrah said, Tanaihi. It's a disputation between the Tanaim. The disputation between Rav and Shmuel is actually disputation between the Tanaim. The Tanya, המוכר פירות לחברו. Someone sell a seed to his fellow. Uzra'an ולא צמחו. He planted them and he sowed them and they did not grow. So he said, זרעוני גינה, if there are garden seeds, שאין נאכלים, which are not eaten, so the seller, חייב באחריותן, he is responsible. Why? Because as we learn in the previous page, those seeds only for זריעה, for planting. זרע פשתן שנמכר, if there are linseed, that it sells for what? Also for the purpose of eating, אינו חייב באחריותן. He is not responsible. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi disputed and said, so basically just before we go the next part, so since some persons buy them for the purpose other than sowing, the seller can claim to have sold them for any of these purposes. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi disagree. Rabbi Yossi Omer, we now turn to page 93b, נותן לו דמי זרע. Rabbi Yossi basically is the Tana that hold the same as Rav, that he must return to him the price of a seed. Why? He holds that as linan bataruba, most of the linseed is sold for sowing purposes, so therefore you have to give him the money. So amru lo, so that's basically the third view the Ritva said. הרבה לוקחים אותו לדברים אחרים. The reality is that people take it for many other purposes. Other purpose, for example, they buy it for medicine, for alternative medicine, for healing. It's all kind of idea why people use it. Man Tana'ei, who was the Tanaim that disputed and said that we go by the majority? If you tell me Rabbi Yossi ve'amru lo, which means Rabbi Yossi imposed the seller to pay because he holds the same as Rav, that as lin bataruba will go by the majority. The third view, that the one who exempt the seller, follow Shmuel, that Rashbam said that you don't go by the majority. Travayu bataruba azli. Both go by the majority. Marazil bataruba de inchei. One goes by most of the people use it for food or for medicine, so therefore he exempts the seller from payment. Umarazil bataruba de zri'ah. And the other one go by the most, Rabbi Yossi, go by the rov zraim, by most of the time, that the majority of the time. Ela itanakama ve'Rabbi Yossi itanakama ve'amru lo. So it's the first time and Rabbi Yossi, or between the first time and those who replied to him. So Shmuel hold the same as Tanakama, that do not go by the majority. Rav hold either Rabbi Yossi or Amru lo, that you go by the majority. But basically the majority, the Meforshim said that that's applied to the purchaser. The Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, have a different interpretation, just go by the Rashbam. Tanu Rabbanan Ma'u noten lo. The rabbis taught, what does he who sold garden seeds which are not eaten refund the buyer who sold them without success? So they said he pay him the cost of the seed but not expenses. The others said no, he pay for the expenses, it must be refunded. So here we have the Tosfot and the Maharsha that said that basically it was Rabbi Natan, based on the Gemarrah Norayot 13b, but that's the Kabbala, that's the Tosfot hold, that's the way we know it. Maharsha challenged it, but anyway. So, hey Rabban Shimon Gamliel, that you need to impose upon the seller also the expense. אילם רבן שמעון גמליאל דמתניתין דתנן המוכר פירות לחברו עוזרן ולא צמחו ואפילו זרע פשתן זה הסטייטמנט במשנה אינו חייב באחריותן. אם הספר רבן שמעון גמליאל אומר גזרו לגינה של הנכדים חייב באחריותן. תנא קמא הכי כאמר זרע פשתן, so which means that only the seller זרע פשתן הוא דאינו חייב באחריותן, אז זרעוני גינה, the garden seed, שאינה נכדים חייב באחריותן, אלא לאו הוצאה היא כבנאיו. We have the difference in responsibility of the expenses, which is the koneh, the buyer, need to be compensated for all the expenses involved in hotzaot hazri'ah, to plant the seed. Mar, which is Tanakama Savar, Dmei Zera, he said that he needs to pay just the fund of the seed. Umar, which is Rabban Shimon Gamliel Savar, Af HaHotza'ah. He needs to pay also for the expenses. So, Mimai, how can this be proved? Dilma Ipcha. Maybe you said that the opinion of the two Tanaim, you should be reversed. That Tanakama imposed the expenses and Rabban Shimon Gamliel accept the expenses. Rabbeinu Gershom in the Rashbam said that the key is how far you go with that expense. What exactly involved with the expense? How the Rav Chizda hold that the Yesh Omrim, it's in regard to the expense, and he hold that that's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel specifically. How do we know that? Anyway, alokasha kol tana batra litfuye milta kashati. So they said that any Tana, who is mentioned last, enter the discussion for the purpose of adding some restrictions. So, in a sense, any time that you don't know what exactly the disputation involved, we assume that the Mishnah bring the view of the one who wants to add to the view of the previous one. That's the way the Ritva and Rashash explains. So in this case, Rabbi Shimon, who is in fact, must therefore be the one who adds the expenses to the seller's responsibilities. V'dilma kula, maybe you said that the entire Mishnah, Rabban Shimon ben Gamlieli, the entire Mishnah follow Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and that only in a few words are missing. V'chasuri mechasra, v'hachik tane. And this is what the Mishnah really teaches. המוכר פירות לחברו זרען ולא צמחו אפילו זרע פשתן הוא חייב באחריותן. If anyone has sold fruit to another, and the buyer saw them, and they did not grow, even if they were lean seed, he is not responsible. Divrei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that's the view of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. שרבן שמעון גמליאל אומר, זרעוני גינה של הנחלים חייב באחריותן, הזרע פשתן אינו חייב באחריותן. The lean seed is not. So you don't have here proof that Rabban Shimon Gamliel imposed upon the seller to pay the extraordinary expenses. אלא had Rabban Shimon Gamliel. The source of the view of Rav Chizda in Yesh Omrim is Rabban Shimon Gamliel Letanya. Hamolich chitin letachon. If one takes wheat to grind and a miller does not moisten prior to grinding and make it into a brown flour, or coerce them brown, or if one takes flour to a baker who makes of it bread which falls in two pieces, המוליך חיטין לתחון ולא תתן, ועשן סובין ומורסן, קמח נחתון והפרעו פת ניפולין, בהמה לטבח ונבלה. So it's all kind of cases that mistake happen. חייב מפני שהוא כנושא שכר. He is responsible because you hold him the same as a guardian that take payment for service, like belly that receive payment for service, נושא שכר, או כנושא שכר. The Chazon Ish in Bava Kama chapter 7 elaborates, and it's also Machne Ephraim. Want to differentiate between a volunteer that did something and mistake happened, or mitlamed, or someone who's just learned, versus, I remember a case not long ago, painful case, of someone who studied shchita, and in the midst of the shchita, the animal died. And the question is, they tried to impose liability, and obviously later on it turns that it was not nevela, it was treifa, that things when they opened the animal it was issues internally, but the concept is the same concept. רבן שמעון גמליאל אומר, נותן לו דמי בושתו ודמי בושת אורחיו. Based on that, we go to the whole idea of the embarrassment and expenses for the embarrassment. They said, וכן היה רבן שמעון גמליאל אומר, מנהג גדול היה בירושלים, המוסר סעודה לחברו וקלקלה. You have a catering and the caterer messed up for all kind of reason. And soon I'm going to give you several cases, Rav Grossman and other cases. נותן לו דמי בושתו ודמי בושת אורחיו. We need to pay for the damage of him and his guest. מפה פרוסה על גבי הפתח, כל זמן שמפה פרוסה אורחים נכנסים. That was at the commencement of the meal, a cloth was spread over the door. So long as the cloth was spread, so guest entered. שמפה פרוסה נכנסים, אורחים נכנסים, נסתלקה מפה when the cloth was removed. אין האורחים נכנסים, no guests entered. So this is the Yerushalayim, because the cloth was a signal that the meal was in progress within the house. Now, there is a response. I just give you the vignette of responsa from the Rav Grossman. I want to find it here on my call. 1 second. There's a response from Rav Grossman, Rav Israel Grossman. So the question is, Reuven, he ordered X amount of food for the wedding of his son, and one chicken turned to be spoiled, and the person have 2 days with non-stop going to the bathroom, and it was embarrassment to Reuven, the Baal Simcha. So he asked a question, if the caterer need to pay him or not, and how much. So in the book Divrei Mishpat, Chelek Dalet, Siman, the page Shin Tzadik Dalet, he bring here our Gemarrah, Metzia Tzadikim Lamud Bet, and he bring also two in Orachaim, Sof Siman Kufaim, Pia Shulchan Aruch and others, that spoil mana mekulkelet, don't spoil plate, it's mekach ta'ut. But the question is how far you go with that. So you hold that in part he needs to compensate. Shari Yosher responds on that, how far, if that's manat tefillah, if that's just one or not. But the Ben Yoyada say that when it's come to, you call it minhag gadol, why minhag gadol? But that's because it's not min adin. It's like nifnim mishuat adin, that it's like the Shon Sagenao that did it. To imply to people, look, even your friends open the house and offer, if he is not in that financial situation, is not capable, be careful before you go and eat there. This is something, a message that also we should be careful when it's come to smachot. So in general we say the halacha is not according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and the Braita. When it's come to smachot, one should be very careful, especially when you go to smachot of people who really cannot afford. They invited you, you come late, invite you for a meal. Usually a person should reject it, and that's the Ben Yoyada said, the implications, that even a person who wants to show generosity, if you know that he really not in that position, you should avoid yourself from get him to the expense of paying full meal.